Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight the good stuff is being homebrewed in the backwoods of Man Elmoth.
Maeglin, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, and I'm joined once again by the Finrod to my Turgon, Alan Sisto.
Thanks, Sean. Folks, tonight we are moving into a little family drama in Chapter 16 of the Silmarillion of Maeglin.
Yeah, you're not kidding about family drama. This is kind of a tough chapter. It's really a step beyond some of the drama we've seen with the Noldor in the past. You know, we've seen a lot of extended family drama. The kind that makes holiday dinners awkward. This is a dysfunction.
Turkey.
Right. Yeah. Pass the gravy. This is a dysfunctional nuclear family, and it's just that much more powerful and sad for that.
It is. You're right. But of course, we don't want to start on too much of a down note, so we'll try to bring our usual brand of fun to the text tonight, if fun you can call it. But before we get to that, Sean, does Bartleman have anything in his bag for us tonight?
He does have a nice, timely question for us here tonight. This is one we've been saving for this episode.
I'm
this
surprised
one comes
he didn't
to us.
Save it too long. You know, Bartleman typically does that.
He does that sometimes. He does. You can't rely on that guy. He's been making it hard to have faith in him. But
one thing pushes another.
One thing pushes another. They say. No, we kid Bartleman. We love him. We keep him around because
he's cheap.
He's cheap. And
he does work cheap. Yeah.
He's got the best stuff.
Well, that's true.
The best stuff around. Anyway,
best good stuff we can get.
Yeah, exactly. He's got a really timely question for us. So this one comes to us from our old friend Nakat in Pakistan.
All right.
And she writes in regarding rejection and love, as seen in males versus females. She says, when females are rejected in love in the mythology, they generally turn out good, tender despite their pain. Examples being Eowyn and Finduilas. Now, I know first-time Silmarillion readers don't know Finduilas yet, so
we'll get to her.
Probably try and focus on Eowyn for this discussion.
She's hanging around the tree.
Wow. Yeah.
But she's held up.
Yeah. She's held up. Oh, man. Oh, that's terrible. That's just terrible. Too soon.
Way too soon. It hasn't even happened
and
yet.
That we haven't even gotten to it yet. Yeah. She goes on to say, males, however, turn evil, starting with Melkor, who was rejected by Varda, to Feanor, who was rejected by Galadriel. I think we might have to explain that one a bit.
Yeah.
Eöl, Maeglin, and Grima. The only exceptions being Brandir and Gwyndor.
Two more we don't know yet. Yeah.
We also haven't gotten to yet, and we'll get to those later, so we won't say anything more about those guys tonight. So, again, timely question because two of the men that she mentioned as examples, well, I shouldn't say men, two of the guys she's mentioned, the males, are major players in tonight's story, Eöl and Maeglin.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll save those two and talk about them as we get through the story. But maybe we can start with the three examples that I think everybody listening knows about, which is Melkor, Feanor, and good old Grima Wormtongue.
Good old Grima. Poor
old
Grima. Well, I have to say two main things come to mind. The first is about the Galadriel-Feanor thing, because we don't get to see Galadriel's rejection of Feanor here. That's in Unfinished Tales, so we'll get to it, I don't know, about 6 years.
You're feeling, you're optimistic about that one.
You're right. That's if we maintain a really good pace.
Exactly.
But here's the relevant passage from it. I'm going to go ahead and just read this one paragraph. It's talking about Galadriel's hair. The text says that it was golden like the hair of her father and of her foremother Indus, but richer and more radiant, for its gold was touched by some memory of the star-like silver of her mother. And the Eldar said that the light of the two trees, Laurelin and Telperion, had been snared in her tresses. Many thought that this saying first gave to Feanor the thought of imprisoning and blending the light of the trees that later took shape in his hands as the Silmarils. For Feanor beheld the hair of Galadriel with wonder and delight. He begged 3 times for a tress, but Galadriel would not give him even one hair. These two kinsfolk, the greatest of the Eldar of Valinor, were unfriends forever. I love that. The unfriends.
The unfriends, yeah.
So there's some creepy cousin stuff going on here, maybe even super creepy cousin stuff.
Or uncle, right?
You're right. My mistake, not cousin, uncle. You're right. The uncle niece. Yeah. Because she's
creepy cousin will come later in the episode.
You're right. This is creepy uncle. This is your really creepy uncle asking the pretty niece, for a lock of her hair. Oh, man, that's just so wrong on every level.
That does kind of make it worse.
Like I want to take a shower now. I mean, ew. I'm not sure, though. She talks about that Feanor was rejected by Galadriel. I'm not sure this is rejection in love. I don't think that... Don't get me wrong. You know me. If I can blame Feanor for something, I will.
Oh yeah, but we'll never pass up that chance.
Ooh, it's a Feanor-shaped pinata. Whack. But I don't know that I'm going to quite interpret this as being a love, or even really a lust, for Galadriel herself, as much as it is. If I have her hair, I can make even prettier things, because we all know Feanor is about making pretty things. So
I don't know. That could be. I mean, it is one of those things that people are kind of divided on. People who've read that story.
There's some implication, definitely.
There is some implication. It is controversial. I think I am more on the lust side. Mm-hmm. Probably again just because I don't put anything past Feanor.
No, nothing. You're right.
I feel like
nothing's off limit for him.
But right. But hey, maybe that's my bias creeping in there. So it is certainly controversial. But I think the main thing really is whatever it was, Galadriel was creeped out by Feanor.
Oh yeah,
because she saw in him all those traits that we've talked about, right?
The greediness, the anger, the jealousy, the pride, the possessive.
The objectification of people. We've seen him objectifying people.
Completely. They're all things to use to achieve his ends.
Right, exactly. And so even if it was... and so even if it wasn't a lust for her, but it was just a desire to take her hair and make something pretty out of it, there is still an objectification there.
Oh, there definitely is.
And I think it's important to note that, Galadriel was creeped out because Feanor was who he was. He didn't become all those horrible things because she rejected him.
Right, exactly. It's not as though her rejection was, the trigger.
Was what sent him down his path to,
No.
Today it's rejection by Galadriel, tomorrow the kinslaying. Yeah.
Oh, man. If I can't have her, nobody's going to have her. I'm going to wipe out everybody. No, I don't think this was, a result of his rejection. If
I don't know that, to be fair, to knock it, I don't know that that's what she's saying
that's
either.
True. She may not. I don't. Yeah.
But I do think that I think Feanor had this darkness in him from the beginning, and we've talked about that. Yeah. We talked about that on the show from the moment we really from the moment we met him.
That's true. We started to see a lot of those Melkor-like traits very early on. And you're right. I want to be fair to Knockout. That may not be exactly what she meant. It just seems kind of the implication or the underlying assumption of her question.
Yeah.
But the second thing that comes to mind is this reference about women turning out good when they're rejected. She cites two, Eowyn and Finduilas. Finduilas, sorry. I sometimes want to do the UI as a diphthong, and I know it's not it there. Finduilas.
I don't know. You might be right about that. I need to look into that.
I'm sure somebody will tell us. Somebody will tell us before we even get there. But I don't think it's a diphthong there. I may be wrong. But first off, that's a really small sample size. But and we don't see much.
Two female characters. One we can't even talk about because it would be a spoiler.
Right. One would be a spoiler, but I am going to say a little bit about her. We only learn one thing about her after her rejection, and we won't talk about who she's rejected by. And that's that she became sorrowful, and she grew wan and silent, pale and silent. That's it. That's all we know. So, okay, great. She didn't become evil. We don't know that she became all of a sudden tender despite her pain. She just kind of continued on, it seems, just with a little bit of sorrow. But I think the example of Eowyn might kind of run counter to the point that she's trying to make here, the idea that they turn out good, tender despite their pain. Eowyn, really, after her rejection, she became, for all intents and purposes, suicidal. She was desperate to die in battle. She was, we talk a lot about hope and despair. She was filled with despair. She had no hope, none.
And she was hardened, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
I
her
think,
heart was cold.
Yeah.
Cold.
I mean, it isn't.
Sorry. Willing to sacrifice yourself.
Well, she couldn't sacrifice their love because that didn't exist.
That's right.
Oh,
That's
man.
right.
But yeah, isn't there? I don't have that passage in front of me, but isn't
she
there
talks
something about
she wants nothing more than to ride to war like her brother, or better, like Theoden the king, for he died. So she wants to go and die. And so to me, I don't see this as somebody who's turned out tender despite their pain. I see her as being somebody who, virtually was going to kill herself until she's finally convinced that Faramir loves her and isn't just feeling sorry for her. Remember, she thinks for a long time that it's just pity. And he has to kind of convince her, no, lady, this isn't
This isn't
pity.
Yeah.
I love you.
Yeah, yeah.
And only then does she kind of, find hope and get out of that despair and that desire to kill herself. So I really can't accept the premise that women who are rejected turn out good, and that, as a flip, that men who are rejected turn out evilly.
Yeah.
Though we'll see some of that tonight, maybe.
We
maybe
we will, and I mean we'll definitely see some evil men get rejected, but it's a chicken and egg question. I think
it is. I think you're right.
What about Melkor?
Oh, well, that's a good point. That one's pretty easy to deal with, I think, right off. We do know that Varda rejected him, but if we look at the text, that appears to be something that happened long after he had already woven his discord into the music. So, he's already rebelled. He's already done the evil thing. He's already expressed his desire to usurp Iluvatar's authority. Oh, and then Varda rejects him. So it's not as though we could put a cause and effect relationship between the two, unless we can actually say that his evil is a cause of the effect of her rejecting him, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. I think that one's just. I'm inclined to agree with you. I think it does seem as though. I don't know. I always imagine that the music is the first thing the Ainur did after they were created.
It is. That's exactly. I mean, that's what the text says. He calls them together, declares a mighty theme. Boom. They start to sing.
Yeah. So Varda's rejection had to have happened at some point after that, and so he was already Discord boy long before that. And
Discord boy. Discord boy.
And like all like all sowers of discord and prideful characters in this legendarium, he just doubled down on it.
Yeah, of course
he wasn't gonna back off. It wasn't that Varda's rejection was what solidified the evil in him.
No, he was already there.
Interesting.
But what about Wormtongue?
Well, and then we've got Wormtongue.
We'll talk about Eöl and Maeglin in the text, so we'll get to them. But Wormtongue's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wormtongue actually reminds me a bit of Maeglin, who we're going to talk about tonight. And I think maybe of all the examples that Knocket's given us, I kind of feel like Wormtongue might be the closest one, I think, to making that point. We do know that Eowyn was to be part of the price that Saruman paid him for his treachery, right?
Well, we know that was suspected to be the price. He never actually confessed, but
that's true. That was Gandalf's allegation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'll actually read that little passage here to kind of bring that.
Okay, good. You've got that. Good.
It comes out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say. I mean, I think it's only part because. There's something in there about have your pick of the share of the treasure. You've got the passage. If you've got it, maybe you can just read it.
Yeah. It's from chapter 6, King of the Golden Hall, and Gandalf is talking. He's talking to Éomer and saying, "Listen, you don't understand Wormtongue. He's already wasted our time." And then I'll pick up in the middle of that paragraph. How long is it since Saruman bought you? What was the promised price? When all the men were dead, you were to pick your share of the treasure and take the woman you desire. Too long have you watched her under your eyelids and haunted her steps. Éomer grasped his sword. That I knew already, he muttered. For that reason I would have slain him before, forgetting the law of the hall. But there are other reasons. He stepped forward, but Gandalf stayed him with his hand. Éowyn is safe now, he said. And then, of course, he goes back to talking to Wormtongue and tells him, you should probably go back to Saruman. He might remember your service. But, so Gandalf's clearly saying that the price was a share of the treasure and Éowyn. But it's evident, even if that isn't the case, even if that's not the price, it is clear that he's lusted after her because Gandalf observes that he's watched her under his eyelids and haunted her steps.
Right.
And Éomer has observed the same thing.
Right.
So
yeah, it's just an assertion, but it's based on based on something.
Exactly. They've both seen him ogling her and lusting for her. Ogling. I love using that word.
Ogling.
That's just not a word you get to use every
Hopefully
day.
You don't get too many chances to use that word.
It's like Googling without the go. Maybe I should come up with a search engine. Ogle.
Ogle. Don't.
No,
Please
I won't.
Don't.
I won't. I will not, I promise. Yeah.
There will only be one kind of content on that search engine.
No. We're not going there. But
Oh man!
Coming back to the story, which I probably should have done in the first case, is that there's not really any evidence that the evil came after he was rejected by her. It may be, or it may be that he was already evil. We just don't know. The text is really silent on it.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the one case where love or lust for a woman has really been a driver in somebody's treachery.
Oh, clearly motivation.
But again, was that the cause, or was he already evil before that? We as you said, we just don't know.
We just don't know. But Nakat, stay with us because we still get to talk about Eöl and Maeglin later. So we'll see what we get to with that. But I think that's about it. So why don't we go ahead and jump into the discussion of the story itself?
Okay, let's do it.
Sounds good. We'll start out with the Gilded Cage of Gondolin. I'll start by reading a little bit into this first paragraph. First, we just get that she's already tired of the place, even though it's beautiful. She has been there 200 years, so she wants a change of scenery. But Turgon was loath to grant this, and long denied her. But at the last he yielded, saying, "Go then if you will, though it is against my wisdom, and I forebode that ill will come of it, both to you and to me. But you shall go only to seek Fingon our brother, and those that I send with you shall return hither to Gondolin as swiftly as they may." But Aredhel said, "I am your sister and not your servant, and beyond your bounds I will go as seems good to me, and if you begrudge me an escort, then I will go alone." And Turgon answered, "I grudge you nothing that I have, yet I desire that none shall dwell beyond my walls who know the way hither. And if I trust you, my sister, others I trust less to keep guard on their tongues." Of course, we did that without ever introducing who we are talking about, and my apologies about that. Aredhel, as the text says at the very beginning, Aredhel Arfiniel is the White Lady of the Noldor. She's Fingolfin's daughter, Turgon's brother. So, very important that we get that.
Turgon's her brother.
Right.
Her older brother. Yeah.
Did I say she's Turgon's brother?
I think you just said Turgon's brother. Yeah.
Turgon
I don't think there was
brother.
a verb in there. Yeah.
My apologies, folks.
Oh, yeah, no worries.
She's clearly very, very, she's very much a female. She's not the brother.
Yes. Yes. The White Lady of the Noldor. Interesting. Eowyn is the White Lady of Rohan, isn't she?
I believe she is. Fascinating.
I don't think that means anything, but it doesn't, it's just interesting.
The two are very much not the same.
Yeah, they are very, very different. I think it's interesting that you point out that Gondolin is this, as the Gilded Cage. It is this incredible place. We talked about how beautiful it was last time.
Gorgeous.
But she still feels trapped by it, and it's worth noting that Turgon, he brought everybody to it, and he locked them in, and he kept them there.
That is true. That was part of the deal. You come with me, and you're not going anywhere else.
You're not leaving.
And for an immortal, that's a tough thing to take.
Yeah.
60 years might be one thing, but 200 years.
Yeah.
Ah.
And exactly. An interesting, really fast passage of time here too. 200 years.
Yeah. Boom.
It kind
of 200 years later. Now next.
Right. Yeah, but I don't know. It's just interesting, and I think that I think it's worth noting that again, this is the king's sister, and even she's not allowed to leave.
No.
And it's because
he tries to keep her from leaving for a long time. Long denied her.
Yep.
It's very interesting. He does finally, yield, but that's not what he wanted to do.
No.
This whole rule about not leaving it made me think that Gondolin is sort of the Roach Motel of Noldor's. Noldor's check in, but they don't check out.
Well, that's pretty good. I'm still thinking of it as the Gilded Cage, and I'm sitting here.
And she wanted a
thinking
life.
How she wanted to. Oh man, what's the line? I can't. It's tip of my tongue.
Beyond the Gilded Cage.
Beyond the Gilded Cage. It's
in touch with some reality.
Some reality beyond the Gilded Cage. That's it. That's what I was looking for.
Folks, if we can't get a Rush title in our episode, we'll get a Rush lyric in the
Make sure we get a Rush
somehow.
Quote. Yeah. So,
I just hope that nobody thinks that means we're talking about Rush Limbaugh. Let's make sure we don't get any Rush quotes there.
Rush the band.
Rush the band, the Canadian rock band. Yes, I think they might be the only. I'm trying to think how many other Canadian rock bands have. I mean, Loverboy doesn't count.
There's a handful. There's been a handful, but
I can
none,
think,
none to challenge the majesty that is Rush.
No, indeed not.
The power trio. Anyway.
Yeah, so...
We digress.
We do. That's what we do. We're the digressors.
Our unofficial motto.
It's getting more and more official every day, folks. I love her attitude, though. She's, I'm your sister, not your servant. You can't tell me what to do. Yeah. Material's like, well, yeah, I'm the king. I can. But he does concede and gives her an escort, tells them where to take her, gives them a nice little warning, reminding them that, look, the lady doesn't know, all the dangers that are out there.
And he gives her a good explanation. Others I trust. If I trust you, my sister, others I trust less to keep guard on their tongues. Exactly. I'm not worried about you telling somebody.
No,
I'm worried about someone.
One of your escorts.
One of your escorts. Yeah, somebody
tortured.
Getting out.
Yeah. I mean, certainly getting tortured. Getting captured by the enemy. That kind of thing. When her being out there, just having somebody who knows the way there out there, anything could happen. Yeah, exactly. So, anything could happen. And
something will happen.
And something will happen. In fact, we're going to find out something happens real soon. Why don't you take the next little bit there?
But when she came to the ford of Brithiac in the river Sirion, she said to her companions, "Turn now south and not north, for I will not ride to Hithlum. My heart desires rather to find the sons of Feanor, my friends of old." And since she could not be dissuaded, they turned south as she commanded, and sought admittance into Doriath. But the march wardens denied them, for Thingol would suffer none of the Noldor to pass the girdle, save his kinsfolk of the house of Finarfin, and least of all those that were friends of the sons of Feanor.
Yes, we know that.
Understandably.
Yeah, they don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah.
Do you think that she changed her mind after she got out, or do you think this was something she'd intended all along?
I kind of think it's something she's intended all along.
That's kind of where I'm going too. I mean, it makes it sound like, well, you know what? I don't want to go that way after all. I think from the get-go, that was what she was intending.
I think so. I mean, I don't see how she suddenly comes up with this idea. We know she was restless. We know she was friends with the Sons of Feanor.
Yeah. Well, especially the two she's going to end up hanging out with.
Yeah. So...
There's questionable taste in friends, I must say, but we'll get to that.
She really does, yeah.
Really? I mean, if you're going to be friends with a couple of the Sons of Feanor, you might do better than those two.
Yeah.
But
think of a couple of guys whose names start with M, who I might have picked first.
Yeah, M's better than C's in this case. So she says she's turned away from Doriath, and we see, and we're not going to read the whole text, but we see that they basically tell her, well, here's the way you can get there. You can either go, south all the way around, or you can go north through the Brithiac, or from the Brithiac through Dimbar and along the North March. So you can basically go into the scary place. What was that zone in EverQuest that you talked about?
Kithakor Forest.
You could go into Kithakor Forest.
Kithakor Forest of Valerians, yeah.
So that's where she goes. She's
Nandun Gorthib, yep.
And it's a terrible, terrible thing. Get split. She gets split from the escort. They are looking for her, fearing that she's been ensnared or poisoned from the streams.
Drank from the poison streams. Yeah, we talked about the poison streams last time. And,
exactly.
We talked about just the intense fear the Noldor have of this place. You call it the scary place. And interesting that they were looking for her, and then basically the spiders chased them out.
Yeah. The fell creatures of Ungoliant aroused and pursued them, and they barely got away.
Hardly escaped with their lives,
So they come back with the bad news, and Turgon, oh, man. He sat long alone, the text says, enduring grief and anger in silence. He's ticked.
He knew something bad was going to happen, and here it does.
He knew, and it didn't even take very long. and he doesn't even have, what did you tell me? He doesn't even have Thingol's excuse?
Well, Thingol's excuse is always, my wife's always saying something bad's going to happen. Turgon just, I don't know, we don't see this foreboding as quite as often as we do, coming out of Melian. Thingol, I think, has just started to tune his wife out after a while.
She's always got bad news. She's always got bad news. I'm not going to listen to her anymore.
Right.
Which
he
is really
still should listen to her.
Yes, he should.
But still, Turgon doesn't get this all the time. You'd think he would have learned to listen to his gut.
Yeah.
Which I guess he did, but then he
for
just...
a long time, but she kept nagging him. She kept coming and kept coming. And he's like, fine.
Gotta be a bad feeling, though. Like,
it must be. I knew this was going to happen. I would say I told you so, but I'd be telling myself that, and so I'm angry. Yeah. But the good news is, it's good news for Turgon for now, at least, is that Aredhel did not get ensnared or drunk from the poison streams. In fact, we'll read here that Aredhel, having sought in vain for her companions, rode on, for she was fearless and hardy of heart, as were all the children of Finwë. And she held on her way, and crossing Escalduin and Aros, came to the land of Himlad, between Aros and Kelon, where Celegorm and Curufin dwelt in those days, before the breaking of the siege of Angband. At that time they were from home, riding with Caranthir east in Thargelion, but the people of Celegorm welcomed her and bade her stay among them with honor until their lord's return. There for a while she was content, and had great joy in wandering free in the woodlands. But as the year lengthened, and Celegorm did not return, she became restless again, and took to riding alone ever further abroad, seeking for new paths and untrodden glades. Thus it chanced in the waning of the year that Aredhel came to the south of Himlad, and passed over Kelon, and before she was aware, she was enmeshed in Nan Elmoth. Now, before we get to Nan Elmoth, let's talk about what happened here with Aredhel.
Mm-hmm. So she found Celegorm and Curufin.
Right.
Our friends, yeah. She found their people.
Right, she found their people. Yeah. She found their land. We find out what she was like during this search. She was fearless and hardy of heart. So it sounds like she was maybe braver than her escorts in some ways.
Definitely sounds that way. They had that fear of the place, and she just kind of continued on. It mentions that all the children of Finwë had that fearlessness and hardiness of heart. I think obviously we have to infer that children here means descendants, because of course she wasn't Finwë's.
Sure.
She wasn't Finwë's daughter. She was his granddaughter.
She was a granddaughter.
Notably, I think it's she's the daughter of Fingolfin, who of course is the most steadfast and valiant of Finwë's sons. So I think it's definitely some of the family valor is there. We see it so much with Fingon and Turgon because they have battle moments, but we don't really see it as much with Aredhel except here. I think that's cool.
That is cool. That's a very good point. And then her choice in friends, it just seems a little. What is this about? I don't know. She kind of likes the bad boys, it seems, but we'll get more of that later. I guess
it does. Yeah, she kind of likes hanging out with troublemakers, I think.
And she's restless again. And we'll see that this isn't this is the second time, but it's not the last time.
Right.
There's something about that, but we'll get to more of that in a little bit. Why don't we have you take the next little bit here about Nan Elmoth itself?
Okay, so this is the very next paragraph. In that wood in ages past, Melian walked in the twilight of Middle-earth when the trees were young, and enchantment lay upon it still. But now the trees of Nan Elmoth were the tallest and darkest in all Beleriand, and there the sun never came. And there Eöl dwelt, who was named the Dark Elf. Of old he was of the kin of Thingol, but he was restless and ill at ease in Doriath. And when the girdle of Melian was set about the forest of Region where he dwelt, he fled thence to Nan Elmoth. There he lived in deep shadow, loving the night and the twilight under the stars. He shunned the Noldor, holding them to blame for the return of Morgoth to trouble the quiet of Beleriand. But for the dwarves he had more liking than any other of the elven folk of old. From him the dwarves learned much of what passed in the lands of the Eldar.
So he was a dwarven spy. No. Interesting.
He certainly didn't get along with his own kind.
No, he didn't. He didn't. And we will see that he really is dwarf-like in many ways.
He is, yeah. I think, I think maybe in the next paragraph we get a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that he is described as restless in this paragraph.
You caught that too. Yeah, I did too. They're both restless. And And in neither case is this a good thing. You know, I mean, we don't, this isn't like wanderlust or just a desire to be free and explore. This is restlessness that sounds to me a lot like discontent. And that's not a thing that Tolkien, implies as a good thing. It's clearly something that's going to have some negative consequences down the line.
Well, and as I recall, I think we saw this same kind of restlessness, and I can't remember if this word was used, but we saw the same restlessness when Feanor and his sons were still in Valinor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was talked about how, how they were always
rested.
on the move. They never rested. They were always
never
looking
rested.
for something.
Always on the pursuit for something more.
Yeah, and we talked about it as a kind of discontent. They weren't just exploring, as you said. It wasn't just wanderlust.
It wasn't a work ethic. It wasn't
right.
It was a desire for more.
It was looking for something. It was a sense of dissatisfaction and looking for something.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. So
there again, we've got that. There's so now we got a connection between Aredhel and Eöl being similarly restless, and there's the connection back to the sons of Feanor and their similar restlessness. We can see why Aredhel would have been drawn to all of this personality type.
As much as he hated the Noldor, he certainly shared some traits in
he absolutely did. Yeah,
with Feanor.
Yeah.
Interesting. So now we're in this forest, which is the darkest forest and the tallest trees. So calling him the Dark Elf this time is probably right.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah.
He's he
especially when we see his wardrobe.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. There's more Feanor similarities, aren't there? Though I'm looking at not only that restlessness, but there were a couple of things that you pointed out.
The self-isolation, that's something that I think you picked up on with Melkor first, and then with Feanor when we talked about each of them.
Yeah, it was kind of a withdrawal from community. This idea that I don't need to be with the others of my kind.
Yeah,
that I'm better on my own, which, that's never a good thing, at least not in Tolkien's world. I mean, I love being alone from time to time. I was an only child, so I could totally get along, by myself for a very long time. But intentionally withdrawing from community, bad idea.
And certainly, Tolkien coming at this with a lot of context of medieval literature. It's never a good thing in medieval literature, from what I can recall.
No.
I mean, things were just so much was centered around community, and
you had to,
and you had to be, it was the weirdos who lived on the fringes. It was there was always the witch living on the outskirts of town, or some weird hermit.
That's true. No, you're absolutely right. In medieval literature, that's even more the case. Today in our modern, very individualistic culture, that's probably a different story. But back then, that wasn't the world that they lived in. It wasn't a world of individuals. It was a world of communities, a world of towns and villages.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Because, these days we might say it takes a village to raise a child. Back then it took a village to keep a village alive. I mean,
exactly.
Each depended on the other, and you had that.
They needed that.
Yeah, you had the one guy who could, make your horseshoes. You had the other guy who could make, Everybody had their own thing.
Everybody had their own part to play in the community.
Exactly. So withdrawing intentionally from
philosophers and plowmen, each must know his part.
Ooh, well said.
It's your second Rush reference of the night.
Wow, that one. Excellent. I did not catch that one in time. But this notion of withdrawing is really, it's never portrayed as a good thing. And once again, we see it here. But if you're not looking for it, you don't think about it. I mean, you don't necessarily think, oh, this is a bad thing that he's living by himself. But it really is.
If you look at it from that
he's intentionally becoming
angle.
a hermit. He's intentionally isolating himself. He doesn't want anything to do with any other, even elves. He only connects with the dwarves. So it's very much like both Melkor and Feanor who did this sort of thing. And it's kind of a vicious cycle, because he starts to self-isolate, and that in turn leads to more error, which keeps him from ever being able to reconnect. And that's why it's often associated with negative consequences. Think about it. Tolkien.
So it's the idea that being isolated from community makes it harder for you to reconnect.
It makes you more error prone, because you don't have that check. And you don't have those other people saying, "Hey, you might want to think twice about this. You're kind of on the wrong path here." You don't have friends to come alongside and give you counsel.
Gotcha.
And so as you make more errors and you do more evil, is what I'm talking about when I talk about error.
Right. Sure.
Then you make it harder for you to ever get reconnected in the community again.
Okay. Yeah, I see
If that
that.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And we see a little bit of that in how he's not able to communicate very well with the Sons of Feanor.
Right.
But, we also have to remember that Tolkien's very big on things like community, teamwork, and camaraderie. These are big themes.
Yes, for sure.
And so somebody that does something that's counter to that is never going to be portrayed as a good guy.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's true.
Just a little bit of a sidebar on that, I guess.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, again, this self-isolation thing is something I had really not picked up on until we started talking about it through the show here.
Melkor, yeah.
Yeah, and as I saw it here, it just kind of popped out at me. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
One thing I think is interesting, as we're drawing the comparison to Melkor, it is interesting and worth pointing out that part of his, or really the only reason listed here for him shunning the Noldor, is that they were to blame for the return of Morgoth.
Yeah.
So, he's a bad guy, but don't make the mistake of thinking he's pro-Morgoth.
No. He's not that bad of a guy.
Right. He's again. We see this word, this term "dark elf" a lot, and it's it's divorce that from fantasy concepts of dark elves who pray to evil gods and things like that. But anyway, just interesting. He's a bad guy, certainly.
Oh yeah.
This self-isolation, I think, is a very telling aspect of that.
Yeah,
but
that's definitely a red flag.
Yeah.
So,
but now we get into you wanted to talk a little bit about how he's dwarvish.
Yeah. Let's talk about this. The next chapter will actually tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Now, the traffic of the dwarves down from the Blue Mountains followed two roads across East Beleriand, and the northern way, going towards the fords of Eros, passed nigh to Nan Elmoth, and there Eöl would meet the Naugrim and hold converse with them. And as their friendship grew, he would at times go and dwell as guest in the deep mansions of Nogrod or Belagost. There he learned much of metalwork, and came to great skill therein. And he devised a metal as hard as the steel of the dwarves, but so malleable that he could make it thin and supple, and yet it remained resistant to all blades and darts. He named it Galvorn, for it was black and shining like jet, and he was clad in it whenever he went abroad. But Eöl, though stooped by his smithwork, was no dwarf, but a tall elf of a high kin of the Teleri, noble though grim of face, and his eyes could see deep into shadows and dark places. And it came to pass that he saw Aredhel Arfiniel as she strayed among the tall trees near the borders of Nan Elmoth, a gleam of white in the dim land. Very fair she seemed to him, and he desired her, and he set his enchantments about her so that she could not find the ways out, but drew ever nearer to his dwelling in the depths of the wood. There were his smithy and his dim halls, and such servants as he had, silent and secret as their master. And when Aredhel, weary with wandering, came at last to his doors, he revealed himself, and he welcomed her, and led her into his house. And there she remained, for Eöl took her to wife, and it was long ere any of her kin heard of her again.
Wow.
Yeah. The second half of that we're going to get to a little bit more, but the first half with the dwarf stuff, I mean, he's a smith, and he's an expert smith. And, this obviously he likes the dwarves. He has traffic with the dwarves. He holds converse with the dwarves. He goes and he's a guest of the dwarves. We saw that he liked them more than anybody else among the elves. Yeah, he probably didn't. He was probably kind enough not even to call them Naugrim. Stunted people.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's interesting. It's a further example of of that isolation from the Noldor, that he seeks the company of others, which it really doesn't strike me as a bad thing.
No.
According to to our modern ethos, but
right, that's
it definitely
cultural. Yeah,
right.
I mean, that's a good thing.
Right, it's a good thing to us today. Definitely. I don't even know if that aspect of it is portrayed as something bad here. Really,
I don't think it is. It's just,
but
it
is definitely odd. It's different.
It is, exactly. That's what I was going to say. It's odd. It's more of an indication of his not being like the others.
Failure to connect with the others. Yeah.
Yeah. He's just not like them. And that's fine, but, we'll see where he turns that.
Right.
This metal, though, fascinating.
Oh, Galvorn.
Galvorn. It remains resistant to blades and darts, hard as the steel of the dwarves, but thin and supple. How amazing.
It's just got to be easy to wear. And he wore it all the time whenever he was abroad.
Well, right, and you wouldn't wear full plate all the time.
You wouldn't wear full plate all the time. It's got to look so cool.
I can't even imagine. Black and shining like
shining
jet.
Black. Yeah. Well, and interesting. Black and shining is exact.
Like ebony armor in Skyrim.
Okay, yeah, I've never played Skyrim. I'm the one person on the planet who's never played Skyrim.
Except that probably wasn't very supple. I mean, it's ebony for crying out loud. I always thought, why would you walk around with? Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Wearing ebony. Well, this black and shining thing gives me a chance to word nerd a little bit here, because actually, that is actually what Galvorn means. It's a cool word.
Ooh. Tell me, Sean. Give me that word nerd goodness.
You got it, man. Galvorn actually comes from the element Gal, which means shining. And that we've seen that
Gil-galad
and Galadriel. And then with a C, it's with a C in Quenya, I think usually.
Right.
And so that's where you see things like Ankhalima, brightest and things like that.
Right.
But then the second half of it is the really interesting part, because this is actually Morn, M-O-R-N, which means black, like in Mordor.
Like Mordor, Moranon.
Mormagil, Moranon. Yeah, all those black words that we see. It actually changes into a V in Sindarin after certain consonants, which includes L. Which is just a fascinating consonant shift. Probably not too fascinating for any of our listeners from who speak any of the Celtic languages, like Irish or Welsh, because that's actually common in Welsh, especially, I think, and probably also in Irish. But of course, we know that Sindarin was sort of based on Welsh in some ways in terms of the sounds. It's called Linician, but as an English speaker, it's just not something I've ever seen. But just a neat change. So
Galmorn, because that would be a little bit awkward to say.
It doesn't. Yeah, because exactly, because Galmorn is not a sound that that LM is not a sound that they like to have in that language. So they change it to So they change it into a V.
Okay, Galvorn.
Yeah, Linician or soft mutation is the name of that change. And again,
my goodness.
I know we've got some Irish listeners. I think we might have a couple of Welsh listeners out there. So they're probably very familiar with it, but. It was new to me.
That's really cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, because I definitely did not catch that. But I did catch the stooped by his smithwork. We talk about this being, thin and supple, but he's still stooped by it, so it's heavy. Interesting. Or maybe,
so was he? That's interesting.
No,
so
I think you're right. I think I know where you're going. You're right. I don't know that it's heavy. It's so much that he is bent over the anvil all the time.
That's what I was thinking, because I feel like blacksmiths are often. There's actually a lot of blacksmiths who are hunchbacks in mythology.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And I don't know if
forward all the time.
Yeah. I'm thinking of
Hephaestus.
Well, I always go back to Greek mythology. Yeah, Hephaestus or Vulcan.
Yeah.
But that's what I thought of here. So I don't know.
You're right. No, I think that makes more sense.
And so you get this idea that he's, I see him as a hunchback, so he's kind of, he's walking around, is stooped, but. If he actually stood up straight, he actually is a tall elf. I mean, he is
very tall.
He's tall like the Sindar.
Right. I mean, we know that that Thingol is the tallest elf ever.
Right.
And he's of the same kin, so he's going to be really, really tall. And fascinating. And take note of this: that his eyes could see deep into shadows and dark places, because we're going to get to that later with Maeglin.
Oh yeah, that's a good catch.
So as we talk a little bit more about the second half of this paragraph with the for lack of a better word, capture of Aredhel. Before we talk about that, I want to bring up a passage from Morgoth's Ring that we talked about a little bit way back with Statute of Finwë and Muriel from Laws and Customs of the Eldar. This is a little bit about marriage. And I'm just, because this isn't a passage that we all have handy, I'm going to go ahead and just read this. It starts with, the Eldar wedded once only in life, and for love, or at the least by free will upon either part. And that's important because we get some question about whether this was free will. And then he goes into a long list of the traditions that go along with betrothal. Those are important because Celegorm and Curufin reference them later. But then we're told these ceremonies were not rites necessary to marriage. They were only a gracious mode by which the love of the parents was manifested. And the union was recognized, which would join not only the betrothed, but their two houses together. It was the act of bodily union, and we're going to try to avoid getting explicit here, folks. It was the act of bodily union that achieved marriage, and after which the indissoluble bond was complete. In happy days and times of peace, it was held ungracious and contemptuous of kin to forego the ceremonies. But it was at all times lawful for any of the Eldar, both being unwed, to marry thus of free consent one to another without ceremony or witness, save blessings exchanged and the naming of the name. And the union so joined was alike indissoluble. And I should say that when he says the naming of the name is actually capitalized. So I think we're talking about Eru here.
I think so,
the naming of Eru, that he's, sanctifying this.
Right, yeah, right.
It's not like deciding whose last name do they get to share.
right. Yeah, no, it's it's the idea of sort of the sacrament of marriage.
Right, exactly. That's an excellent word, sacrament. So, that's really important because we get a little bit about, this sounds like a trap, right? He
for sure, yeah.
set his enchantments, so he can't find the ways out. She's drawn ever nearer and nearer to where he lives. And then she's exhausted when she gets there. Where else am I going to go? There's a house. I'm exhausted. Knock on the door. Hello. Well, welcome, stranger. Come on in.
Well, hello. Hello, lovely lady.
Hello there.
Where are you from? Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Hi, my name is Aredhel. I'm taller than I look.
Do you like my shiny breastplate? It's black.
And supple. Feel it. Touch my breastplate. He welcomes her, leads her into the house. And then
do you ever think about the fact that he wears black and she wears white?
I do.
Isn't that fascinating? I feel like I just picked up on that.
No, it's
like
such
I haven't read this book enough.
Strong contrast. And I think that's another reason why we get the name that she gave Maeglin.
Yes.
We'll get to that.
Yes. Good point.
There's some creepiness here, definitely.
Oh, yeah. He tricks her. Absolutely.
He does. He's tricked her.
He ensnares her.
And he takes her to wife, which does sound very one-sided, but that's why I brought this all up, because it's for love or at the least by free will. So she may not have loved him, but there was at least some level of free will involved here. That's really important. I would even go so far as to say, there's another passage, and I don't have it handy, so folks, I can't quote it, but there was a passage that certainly seemed to indicate that Eöl here, for example, would not have been able to make her the victim of a crime, of a sexual crime, because if he'd started to do that, she could have just simply pulled a Miriel and
just sort of vacated her Hroa.
Her Fea would have left her Hroa and gone to Mandos, and he would have been stuck with a dead person. So pretty much ends that right there. So I just want to make sure that we understand that there was clearly a willingness, even if it was only partial and or temporary on the part of Aredhel.
Right.
So
and we will see that in this very next paragraph.
Well, right.
Actually.
We were going to get to that. I wanted to kind of lay that as groundwork.
Yeah, it's good. It's good background that we need
really
to have
is. It's important because we don't want to. Eöl's not a great guy, what he did here was tricky. But what he did here was not criminal. Let's make that clear.
Right.
So go ahead and take that next paragraph if you would.
Yeah. It is not said that Aredhel was wholly unwilling, nor that her life in Nan Elmoth was hateful to her for many years. For though at Eöl's command she must shun the sunlight, they wandered far together under the stars, or by the light of the sickle moon. Or she might fare alone as she would, save that Eöl forbade her to seek the sons of Feanor, or any others of the Noldor. And Aredhel bore to Eöl a son in the shadows of Nan Elmoth, and in her heart she gave him a name in the forbidden tongue of the Noldor, Lomion, that signifies child of the twilight. But his father gave him no name until he was 12 years old. Then he called him Maeglin, which is sharp glance, for he perceived that the eyes of his son were more piercing than his own, and his thought could read the secrets of hearts beyond the mist of words.
Well, there's a gift.
Yeah, no kidding. And he will use it, or he will
Yes,
try
he
to
will.
use it, as we'll
He
see
will.
soon. But yeah, there's
going back to the
again, not wholly unwilling.
Which means
it's
not wholly
said that she was
willing.
wholly unwilling.
It
Right,
does,
not
you
wholly
know.
willing. Right. And we don't really have any clear answers as to why she stayed with him. He certainly was a bad guy. He certainly, they certainly have a tumultuous relationship as it goes on, as we'll
Right.
see. But at some point, there must have been, I don't know if love is the right word, but there was something that she saw in him.
Yeah. Had to be.
And we see, what was that?
I said it had to be. I mean, she made.
Had to be. I
made
wasn't sure if
a-
you said empathy, because that
no.
might be part of it too.
I don't know about that.
Not that he has any empathy, but I don't know. I just feel like, but we've seen that they both kind of have this restlessness.
Yeah, you're right. There's a
we see
similarity there. Yeah.
Yeah, the similarity between the two. She probably felt some sort of kindred spirit there. We also know that you said this. She was friends with Celegorm and Curufin. She must have a thing for troubled loners. So I just think I think you kind of said bad boy complex. We kind of used that phrase.
She's looking
when we
for
were
a guy
talking
with
before we recorded.
full sleeve of tats and riding a Harley and
Galvorn breastplate is the equivalent of a leather jacket. Black leather jacket.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, it's just we can
wants
joke
a guy
about
with
it, but
felony convictions.
right. He's got the greaser hair. It's just like John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John all over
I was thinking
again.
Grease too. Yeah. Bad news, man.
But yeah, it's just I think we all know those people. Some people are just attracted to people who just are unhealthy
good
for them, or just
right.
are bad news.
That is sad, but right.
Yeah, let's be clear, he did trick her.
He did, no doubt about it.
And so she didn't. She probably made a decision with incomplete knowledge, but she did make a decision to stay there.
That's true. Yeah,
put
that's
it that
true.
way.
She made a decision out of free will, but not a fully informed decision.
Yep.
To remain, to be taken as wife.
Yeah.
So then they have their son, and his name in Quenya, which of course she can't speak anywhere else, is Lomion, or Child of the Twilight. You talked about her being the White Lady and him being the Dark Elf. I think it's partly that, and partly the land, where they live. It's super dark all the time.
Yeah, it is dark all the time.
The sun
they only
never really
leave
gets
at
in
night, or by light of the sickle moon, not even a full moon.
No.
Even that light is too much for Eöl's, liking.
Eöl and Golem now have a lot in common. Curse the yellow face.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
It's pretty bad, really.
Yeah.
But you've got some interesting points on the name thing, because this really is an interesting little twist, isn't it?
Yeah, this was interesting to me just because I was reading this and I thought, this doesn't sound quite right. And so going back to, we've got two places that talk a little bit about naming conventions, and it's Morgoth's Ring, which is the laws and customs among the Eldar that you were just reading from. And there's also a little tiny bit on it in Peoples of Middle-earth, I think it's in the Shibboleth of Feanor. Okay. And we learn from reading these places that usually the father name is actually given at birth, and is announced at a ceremony called the Esse Carme. And it's a big deal. It's, first of all, it's very much an occasion that's celebrated
it's a big party
in the community. Yep. And it's something that happens at birth.
Or shortly thereafter, right?
Or shortly thereafter, but
certainly not
definitely
12
not
years old.
12 years. Yeah. And so we see that, Eöl not giving his son a name until he's much older. First of all, I don't even want to say what it means about his affection for his child. But
You're right.
just considering it from a societal norms standpoint, he's clearly not one to stand on ceremony. He's just disregarding all the conventions of Elvish fatherhood, not even naming his son until he's much older. That, again, is a sign of his withdrawal from community and his disdain for community, really,
Indeed,
and for the ceremonies.
That's
of community.
exactly right.
And
what in the world did they call him? I mean,
I know, because she calls him Lomion in her heart.
Right. Which sounds like it's not out loud.
Right, exactly. And yeah, boy, come here, boy.
Come here, boy. Son, you.
Yeah. Even son seems like too affectionate for Eöl.
You're right. I don't think he's. Yeah.
But going back to the mother name, I think the mother name typically was usually given later.
That's true.
As
It's almost flipped, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is almost flipped. And not always. I think, well, certainly Feanor's mother name was given at birth because she died right after.
That's true.
But and I think there might have been some other examples of it given at birth, but it's not always. And it's usually a name of insight, or I think they say it's either a name of insight or a name of foresight. And it's something that's based on some characteristic.
Ooh, interesting.
And I mean, I think the characteristic here is, as you said, just the twilight under which he was born, the combination of the white and the black.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what's going on here. But again, it's just an inversion of the usual convention, and just another way that this little family is just a little bit
odd,
twisted. I guess it's a
very
bit
good point.
Judgmental way to put it, but they're just a little bit odd. Yeah,
they are. They're off. They're definitely off. But you did point out one thing about the name that Maeglin gave him is pretty interesting. Their keen eyesight. We said to catch that earlier in terms of his eyesight, that he had the same sort of thing. I can't exactly that he could see deep into shadows and dark places.
Right, that Eöl could see deep into shadows, and he saw that his son's eyes were even sharper than his own, and so he actually calls them sharp glance. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not even sure that's a very complimentary name.
It is an interesting thing to celebrate in your child. Right. Yeah.
Well, you got to do what you got to do.
Although I don't know, I'm sure there's somebody out there who's named a kid Hawkeye.
Probably.
These days.
That's true. Yeah, some MASH fan somewhere has probably done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Marvel Comics
or Marvel fan. Yeah.
So the next couple paragraphs, we're not going to read them, but we just want to kind of pick a few bits and pieces out. We know that Maeglin looks like a Noldor, but he's more like the son of his father when it comes to his mood.
Right.
He's not a big talker, but when he does, he's very persuasive.
He's very persuasive.
Very.
Yeah.
And that probably comes
Move
back to
those that hurt him and overthrow those that withstood him.
Overthrow. Yeah.
He's
kind of fan.
He's persuasive in a good way, and he's also he can also just argue you down.
It just wears me down.
Yeah.
We get an actual physical description: tall, black-haired, dark eyes, but bright and keen, and his skin was white, so very, very fair skin.
Yeah, so that kind of
because he never went out in the sun.
Right. And that
really
black and white
goth.
contrast is really it's right there, just in his face.
Yeah, he was full blown goth, right? I mean, with the
with
he
the
didn't even have to have the white makeup.
No.
And like his dad, he gets along with the dwarves. He learns he learns the craft of finding the ores of metals in the mountains. So, his dad was about making things from metal. He's about finding where they are in the mountains, which is interesting. And we'll actually see that again, but not in this chapter.
True.
You know where I'm going, right?
Oh, yeah.
But this next paragraph is the one that's really interesting. We're again not reading the whole thing, but this is what a breakdown here. He listens to her stories, particularly the might and valor of the princes of the House of Fingolfin. But the thing that interested him most is Turgon and Gondolin, and that Turgon had no heir. He's already calculating, isn't he?
He is. Oh, yeah. He is hearing his mother tell him stories about Gondolin, and he is thinking to himself, the king doesn't have an heir.
But he's
and
got
I'm
a daughter.
his nephew.
And
and I'm his nephew, and by the way, he has a daughter
and
who they say is really
attractive.
beautiful.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. What can I do about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's subtle, blink and you miss it, but
That's true.
It's
true.
It's there. He is laying plans here.
He is, and we'll see very soon that it doesn't take him long to try to do something about it. But before we get that, we're going to get a little bit more restlessness. In the telling of these tales, there was awakened in Aredhel a desire to see her own kin again, and she marveled that she had grown weary of the light of Gondolin, and the fountains and the sun, and the green sward of Tumladen under the windy skies of spring. Moreover, she was often alone in the shadows when both her son and her husband were away. Of these tales also grew the first quarrels of Maeglin and Eöl, for by no means would his mother reveal to Maeglin where Turgon dwelt, nor by what means one might come thither, and he bided his time, trusting yet to wheedle the secret from her, or perhaps to read her unguarded mind. But ere that could be done, he desired to look on the Noldor, and speak with the sons of Feanor, his kin, that dwelt not far away. But when he declared his purpose to Eöl, his father was wrathful. You are of the house of Eöl, Maeglin, my son, he said, and not of the Golodrim. All this land is the land of the Teleri, and I will not deal, nor have my son deal with the slayers of our kin, the invaders and usurpers of our homes. In this you shall obey me, or I will set you in bonds. And Maeglin did not answer, but was cold and silent, and went abroad no more with Eöl, and Eöl mistrusted him.
This family.
Yeah, man. So, Maeglin's not trusting yet to, just gently, kindly persuade his mother to please tell him, about where Gondolin is. He's trusting yet to wheedle this from her.
Yeah.
Wheedle your own mother.
Yeah. Right. Or actually break into her mind and, read her unguarded mind.
Yeah. Really charming.
This is your mother.
Come on.
With family like this, who needs enemies?
Yeah. And then, of course, now there's a split between Maeglin and Eöl. Eöl doesn't trust him anymore. Can't blame him.
No.
And it's a pretty strong threat. I'm gonna put you in bonds.
Put you in
boy.
bonds. Yeah.
He did call him his son, though. Oh, I just caught that. You're the house of Eöl, Maeglin, my son. So
he gave him that.
A little bit of affection, right? He didn't call him boy.
He didn't call him boy.
You're of the house of Eöl, boy, not of the Golodrim.
Yeah. That's the closest he comes to any kind of affection for his son.
Just about, especially given what he does in a few pages here.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff. Once again, she's clearly restless. She's just not able to settle anywhere and be content.
Yeah. She's a rambler.
Grass is always greener someplace else.
Yeah.
But particularly the green sward of Tumladen, where it probably is greener.
Where it probably is actually greener. And there's all kinds of beautiful stuff and
your brother and your friends
and 7 lovely walls protecting you from harm and
Yeah. And
you feel
like Tyrion, but
you feel for Aredhel. Or I do.
I do too.
I know what it's like to feel that restlessness.
Of course.
But man, it just gets her in trouble.
It does. You got to be real careful. You got to filter that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. So we've got that, and I just remember.
Well, and she's also lonely. Let's point out that she's also left at home a lot.
Well, that is true. She's the
let's give her that. Eöl and Maeglin are off playing with the boys and in the Aredluin.
They're like a golfing trip,
Yeah, exactly.
She's the lonely elven housewife.
Yeah. You could certainly see her wanting more out of life.
Oh yeah, of course. I didn't want to get stuck here in some dark forest. My husband and son aren't even around.
Yeah.
I should be in Gondolin. It's beautiful.
She's the
there.
sister of a king. She's
true.
A princess.
She is a princess. Wow, that's a good reminder. You almost kind of forget that, but she is royalty.
Yeah.
Let's not forget that. But yeah, so she loves her son, but she's not going to tell him where Gondolin is. He wants to wheedle it.
No, that's true. Yes. Yeah, that's true.
And I'm sure there's part of Turgon's words kind of echoing in her mind. I can't tell him because if I trust you, my sisters, others I trust less, to keep guard on their tongues.
Yeah.
This is one of these things I only told one person.
Right. And she probably knows that, of course she loves her son, but she knows who he is. She knows what he's capable of.
She knows he's the son of Eöl.
Right. So she's not going to tell him. Really just, it's just a tangled web of family drama. It makes me tense just thinking about it all.
I know. It definitely does.
But.
Oh, there was a word in here. There's some word nerdery I wanted to get from you. Golodrim.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We did want to talk about that one, didn't we? So that, you could probably guess from context, that means the Noldor.
Right.
But it is actually the Sindarin cognate of, the Golodrim is actually Goloth is the Sindarin cognate of Noldo. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by cognate is the Sindarin word Goloth and the Quenya word Noldo actually come from the same primitive Elvish root.
Oh, okay.
the word that became Noldo in Quenya became Goloth in Sindarin, and I won't go into all the details of why, but yeah, that's all that means. Is Golothrim is really just the literal translation of Noldor.
Okay. Well then,
and that rim, of course, we've seen that rim a few times.
People
it's a
like
I guess we call it a collective noun.
Yeah.
The Rohirrim, the Gonhirrim, I think we even see the Gondolindrim later on.
Yeah, we
the
do.
people of Gondolin. Yeah. So that's all that is. And for once, it just means Noldo. It doesn't have a pejorative connotation or anything like that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, it's not like I don't know.
It's not like now
stunted people or anything.
Which is another example of rim.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead and take the next paragraph because we've got some very interesting things about to happen now, aren't we?
Yep.
Or don't we?
It came to pass that at the midsummer the dwarves, as was their custom, bade Eöl to a feast in Nogrod, and he rode away. Now Maeglin and his mother were free for a while to go where they wished, and they rode often to the eaves of the wood, seeking the sunlight. And desire grew hot in Maeglin's heart to leave Nan Elmoth forever. Therefore he said to Aredhel, Lady, let us depart while there is time. What hope is there in this wood for you or for me? Here we are held in bondage, and no profit shall I find here. For I have learned all that my father has to teach, or that the Naugrim will reveal to me. Shall we not seek for Gondolin? You shall be my guide, and I will be your guard.
Wow. Well, I guess if I can't get you to tell me where it is, I'll just get you to take me there.
To take me there, yeah.
My goodness. It's fascinating, of course, that both of them want to get out where there is some sun. That was the first thing I noticed.
That is really cool, yeah. I love that.
And then there's this bondage thing. Kind of made me think of the thraldom that Feanor kept complaining about.
The thraldom that Feanor was always complaining about? I had the same thing. Yeah.
Except this one's right.
Here it is a little bit more accurate. Yeah.
the Noldor were not thralls of the Valar, but yeah, pretty much. Maeglin's not going to be able to go anywhere.
When your dad has said, "I will set you in bonds," I think you're pretty much
things the Valar never said to the Noldor.
Right.
500. Yeah. There's no doubt that he's at risk of being literally put in bonds.
Yeah.
And of course he's learned all he can learn here.
Yeah. He's reached the point where his dad's not even taking him on business trips anymore.
No. I'm not taking it with me, man. I don't trust
Dad, are we going to, is it time for the annual trip to Nogrod? Oh, you're not going this year, son.
Oh.
No,
Ouch.
I can't trust you anymore. Yeah, he's kind of reached that point. It's like, okay, I'm not going to get any further career development out of this relationship. Let's go find something else.
You can only give me my associate's degree. I really want an advanced degree.
Right. Exactly, yeah.
Oh, man.
Got to go to Gondolin U.
Yeah. And I need you to take me.
Yeah.
And I love how he's trying to offer something of value. Well, you can take me and I'll be your guard.
I'll be your guard, yeah.
Never mind that she didn't need one when she went through the, Nandan Gortheb.
Never mind that I'm not sure he's ever picked up a sword before except to forge one.
Yeah, that's true, probably.
Well, he's probably gone hunting or something.
I'm sure he has. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's not like he's out picking flowers,
Right.
But
I like.
Yeah.
Well, no, I was looking at the next paragraph already, and Aredhel's reaction to this.
Exactly.
She looked with pride upon her son. Yeah, she looked with pride upon her son. She is, and that's cool.
Well, and
I always forget that Eöl has.
Go ahead.
And she gets what she wants out of it. Sure.
Right. She gets to see the sons of Feanor again.
Yeah. But she's proud of her little boy. I like that.
I agree. And it's interesting. You're right. I forget about the servants, too. Telling the servants of Eöl that they went to seek the sons of Feanor, they departed and rode away to the north. I always forget about them, too. They're obviously, very quiet folk. But it said that earlier that, what was it about?
I saw that.
Something about weary. The servants as he had,
servants
silent
that he had,
and
silent
secret
as their master.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, let's see here. So we get the next paragraph, actually the next quite a bit here that I'm going to be reading. So I apologize in advance for this long passage, but there's some great dialogue here that we really want to enjoy. So here we go. Now Eöl returned out of the east sooner than Maeglin had foreseen, and found his wife and his son but 2 days gone. And so great was his anger that he followed after them even by the light of day. As he entered the Himlad, he mastered his wrath and went warily, remembering his danger. For Celegorm and Curufin were mighty lords, who loved Eöl not at all. and Curufin, moreover, was of perilous mood. But the scouts of Aglon had marked the riding of Maeglin and Aredhel to the fords of Eros. And Curufin, perceiving that strange deeds were afoot, came south from the pass and encamped near the fords. And before Eöl had ridden far across the Himlad, he was waylaid by the riders of Curufin and taken to their lord. Then Curufin said to Eöl, "What errand have you, Dark Elf, in my lands? An urgent matter, perhaps, that keeps one so sun-shy abroad by day?" And Eöl, knowing his peril, restrained the bitter words that arose in his mind. "I have learned, Lord Curufin," he said, "that my son and my wife, the White Lady of Gondolin, have ridden to visit you while I was from home, and it seemed to me fitting that I should join them on this errand." Then Curufin laughed at Eöl, and he said, "They might have found their welcome here less warm than they hoped had you accompanied them, but it is no matter, for that was not their errand. It is not 2 days since they passed over the Erosiak, and thence rode swiftly westward. It seems that you would deceive me, unless you indeed yourself have been deceived." And Eöl answered, "Then, Lord, perhaps you will give me leave to go and discover the truth of this matter." "You have my leave, but not my love," said Curufin. "The sooner you depart from my land, the better will it please me." Then Eöl mounted his horse, saying, "It is good, Lord Curufin, to find a kinsman thus kindly at need. I will remember it when I return." Then Curufin looked darkly upon Eöl. "Do not flaunt the title of your wife before me," he said. "For those who steal the daughters of the Noldor and wed them without gift or leave do not gain kinship with their kin. I have given you leave to go. Take it and be gone. By the laws of the Eldar I may not slay you at this time. And this counsel I add, return now to your dwelling in the darkness of Nan Elmoth, for my heart warns me that if you now pursue those who love you no more, never will you return thither." Wow.
Man, what
Great
a scene.
dialogue.
Such great dialogue.
I wish I could have done it more justice, but Curufin...
Oh, you did fine. You did fine. I think you really get a sense of the power dynamic between those two, don't you? I mean,
you really do. Eöl wants so badly to talk smack, but he knows where he's at, and that he's not in a position to do that.
Yep.
And I love how he's trying to kind of like, just kind of, to find
kind of sweet talk him a little bit.
Yeah.
He's being very, very polite, overly
but also
polite.
trying to get, obsequious comes to mind.
Yes, exactly.
But he's this kind of trying to subtly remind him that, we're on the same side here. It's good to find a kinsman thus kindly at need. Oh, you just pushed the button too far. That was like like when Morgoth told Feanor the Silmarils aren't safe. Or he kind of
that was not the word to say to Curufin.
You did not want to try to call him a kinsman. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And this is where we remember what we talked about earlier from the laws and customs of the Eldar.
Right.
Those gifts are important because that's what brings not just the couple together, but the families together.
Right.
So, like Curufin points out, you may be married to her, but because you didn't do it the right way, you're not part of our family. So,
and as you said, I think it was, not giving the gifts is ungracious and contemptuous
of kin. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you see here. Curufin does not recognize Eöl. He believes Aredhel is something that has been stolen.
Yeah.
Without gift or leave. And, there's a very clear indication that he's implying it's not a legitimate marriage because he didn't follow those ceremonies, or perhaps even the idea that he didn't pay for her. Which we talk. There's a little bit in there about bridal gifts, which it's not really like a dowry. It's more like I think we talked about it's like a jewel. Like a.
Well, that was the gift that the bride's mother would give to the groom, right?
And I think it says that the other would give something.
Yeah, I just don't remember what off the top of my head. That volume's upstairs.
But it's a small gift. It's not a dowry per se. But there is definitely, I think Curufin definitely sees it as sort of a payment. And that Aredhel is an object to have been stolen.
That's true, a possession.
Brings me back to
that rings true with,
exactly.
That totally rings true with the sons of Feanor. To treat another person as an object.
Right, exactly, and I think that's worth noting when we see Turgon's reaction and the way Turgon treats with Eöl later. I think we'll come back to this.
I think you're right.
But definitely, Curufin does not recognize the marriage.
No. So what do you make of the last bit, though? I love this. First of all, there's the subtle threat. Legally, I can't kill you right now. Oh, but by the way,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a big threat right there. If I could, I would, is what that says.
Yeah.
But this last little line, I mean, Corifin's not necessarily known for his foreboding.
Right.
He's not Melian. He doesn't have any gift of foresight that we're aware of, at least not beyond what the Eldar might have in the first place. But that's a pretty strong little statement. Go home.
Every once in a while, when something momentous is happening, somebody unexpected gets a little bit of foresight, and I think that's what's happening here. I think it's interesting that Curufin actually decides to share it with Eöl.
I know. I thought the same thing. It's almost like go ahead.
Just don't turn back, because this is not going to end well for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. It seems like it almost seems out of character for Curufin to give him this warning. The threat sounds
any wisdom at all.
To give him any wisdom at all, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if this is his foreboding, he really should just tell him, you just go right on ahead.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
he really doesn't like the guy.
Go after them. Go after them.
It's interesting that he points out the obvious, that they don't love you anymore, dude.
Yeah.
Both of them. Your wife and your son, they don't want anything to do with you. So, maybe you should take that hint and return home. So what does Eöl do, though? Tell us what he does.
He doesn't. Then Eöl rode off in haste, and he was filled with hatred of all the Noldor, for he perceived now that Maeglin and Aredhel were fleeing to Gondolin. And driven by anger and the shame of his humiliation, he crossed the fords of Aros, and rode hard upon the way that they had gone before. But though they knew not that he followed them, and he had the swiftest steed, he came never in sight of them until they reached the Brithiach, and abandoned their horses. Then by ill fate they were betrayed, for the horses neighed loudly, and Eöl's steed heard them, and sped towards them. And Eöl saw from afar the white raiment of Aredhel, and marked which way she went, seeking the secret path into the mountains.
So she needed to stop at the Bass Pro Shops and buy some camouflage? That's what I'm
She should have
thinking.
done it. Yeah, bright white dress when you're looking for the secret
giveaway.
path. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But we
Such
get
a shame.
here.
Such a shame. But of course, Turgon was right.
Yep, Turgon was absolutely
It's not
right.
Aredhel he had to worry about. It's other people.
Yeah, exactly. But before we get to that, there's something here that answers a little bit, or at least addresses a little bit of Nakat's question. Driven by anger and the shame of his humiliation. Not so much driven by the rejection.
Love of Aredhel or the rejection.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly not, I must win her back, as we'll see.
No. It's hatred of all the Noldor, and we know that he is at least shunned the Noldor long before he ever met her. He's had an enmity for the Noldor for a long time. I'm sure it's inflamed now.
Oh, big time.
I think his pride is certainly stung by Curufin as much as by her and Maeglin. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, it's I think we talked about this. I don't see a nice guy who has suddenly turned into a monster because Aredhel walks out on him. I see a guy who was filled with hatred. He was filled with possessiveness. He really didn't know what love is.
So now we're going to reference foreigner songs too.
No,
not just
no
Rush.
pun intended. Yeah. But
sing it for us. Sing it for us.
No, I will. Nope, I will not.
Lou Reed, you are not.
It is entirely not. Yeah. No, I might be about as good a singer as Lou Reed. Actually.
Oh, ouch.
No, I love Lou Reed. I just, he's not, doesn't really have a smooth voice. Great songwriter.
Oh, absolutely.
But anyway, we digress. But yeah, he just, I don't really see this as a jilted lover suddenly getting angry. He's
no, he was like that even. I mean, you were talking about how
he was like it before. Yeah,
right. He was like that long before she walked out. I honestly think he was like that long before she ever walked in to Nen Elmoth. I mean, he was always this dark, kind of hate-filled, spiteful guy. Certainly, the possessiveness seems to have grown since he had her. But even when he wanted her, it was clearly more of a possessive thing in the first place.
Yeah.
So I just don't see a lot of change in him for the evil. I think he just was that way from the get-go.
Yeah. And I think I previously came to this text with the idea that love for Aredhel was one motivation, but not the most significant. I think the more we talk about it, the more I'm not even sure it's a motivation at all. And I think you're on the same page with that.
I am on that. I mean, if this was where the story ended, we might be able to infer that. But as we'll see later, given some of the things he says once he does get to speak with Turgon, it's clear he doesn't love her. That's gone.
Yeah.
If he ever did, he doesn't anymore. And therefore, it's hard to really imagine it being a factor in terms of his decisions here to go after them.
Yeah.
His only concern really is for his son, and I don't mean for his son's well-being, but for the possession of his son.
Right.
And his hatred of the Noldor. So,
right.
Well, so we get, we'll skip the next paragraph before we read after that, but we'll at least sum up what happens. Basically, Aredhel and Maeglin do get to the gate. She's received with joy. They get up and they get to meet with Turgon. The king is listening to what she has to say, and he likes Maeglin. He sees that, here's a guy who's worthy to be accounted among the princes.
But you have to think this is a superficial assessment, because we know that he looks like a Noldo.
Yeah, he does.
He doesn't act like a Noldo.
Well, it has to be a superficial one at this point. He hasn't gotten a chance to get to know him. But
this is true.
I mean,
you look just like my family. I like you.
And I think what we get is somebody who's going to typically give somebody the benefit of the doubt, and Turgon does that.
Yeah, that's true.
He's not a guy who. Let's compare him to Thingol, who pretty much doesn't give anybody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that's true.
And Turgon is. He doesn't want anybody to leave. He's not going to give him that much benefit of the doubt, but he's willing to at least listen and treat people with respect, as we'll see even when he deals with Eöl here in a little bit.
Right.
I rejoice indeed that our fine Eöl has returned to Gondolin, he said. And now more fair again shall my city seem than in the days when I deemed her lost. And Maeglin shall have the highest honor in my realm.
Remember, Maeglin would be his nephew. So, of course he wants to have some, connection to him.
Then Maeglin bowed low and took Turgon for lord and king, to do all his will. But thereafter he stood silent and watchful, for the bliss and splendor of Gondolin surpassed all that he had imagined from the tales of his mother. And he was amazed by the strength of the city and the hosts of its people, and the many things strange and beautiful that he beheld. Yet to none were his eyes more often drawn than to Idril, the king's daughter, who sat beside him. For she was golden as the Vanyar, her mother's kindred, and she seemed to him as the sun from which all the king's hall drew its light.
Wow. I love this, the fact that the many strange things and beautiful things that he beheld, he'd been in such isolation in this, backwoods forest of Nan Elmoth.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, everything was amazing.
Yeah, everything's going to be amazing. Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like a Tarzan story, I mean, here's
yeah,
this,
yeah, exactly, yeah.
All of a sudden he's in London, and whoa,
right.
How does this happen?
All this technology and this civilization, and
right.
Yeah.
A massive city instead of just a smithy and a house stuck in the middle of the forest. Right.
Yeah.
But boy, watch out. His eyes now are drawn to Idril.
Mm-hmm.
This is dangerous stuff. And yeah, this is kind of where the story turns, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And we're starting to foreshadow the other part of Knocket's question as it relates to Maeglin. And
that is true.
And his fascination with Idril. I still think he's at least as impressed by the city itself as he is by her. I think I love this phrase of the sun from which the king's hall drew its light.
Isn't that beautiful?
Beautiful image. But I'm struck by the fact that the sun is, well, you don't look at the sun directly. You can't.
No,
that's true. You don't really admire the sun for its own beauty.
For a very short time, and then you can't look at anything.
And then you can't look at anything. But I'm struck by the idea that the sun is, a means to an end. The sun's light is valuable because of what it illuminates around you.
That's true.
And I kind of see that there's sort of an indirectness to his appreciation of Idril. I think certainly she's beautiful. We know she's beautiful, but I think that his fascination with her is it goes right back to his fascination with the city itself, and I think he sees her as a means to his end of
At this point, certainly. I think you're right.
wanting to be king of Gondolin. I mean, he wanted to be before.
That was what excited him. That's what made him want to come to Gondolin in the first place. Is king's got no heir.
Right.
I'm a nephew, and I could be a son.
Right. And then he's like, and she's the one I would be marrying if I carried out my master plan?
Hey,
okay,
there's a plus.
I can definitely do this. Yeah.
There's a bonus.
Right.
Yeah, I do think that at this point you're right, that his love at this point is for the city, and she is the means to an end. I think that changes over time. I think there's an infatuation that grows into a really perverted and twisted lust, totally inappropriate, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's, first Maeglin does the right thing. He takes Turgon for Lord and King. I'll obey you. He swears fealty to him. But boy, he's just blown away. Gondolin surpasses all that he'd imagined, and he'd imagined an awful lot.
He'd imagined a lot, yeah.
As Han Solo might say, I don't know, I can imagine an awful lot.
I can imagine a lot, yeah.
Yeah, so he's really, I think, at this point, seeing Gondolin as a potential target for his leadership.
Yeah, I agree.
But what happens now that they've met? Now that Turgon has been reunited with Aredhel and met his nephew, what happens with good old brother-in-law?
Well, we can't have nice things, so.
No, we can't.
But Eöl, following after Aredhel, found the dry river and the secret path, and so, creeping in by stealth, he came to the guard, and was taken and questioned. And when the guard heard that he claimed Aredhel as wife, they were amazed, and sent a swift messenger to the city, and he came to the king's hall. "Lord," he cried, "the guard have taken captive one that came by stealth to the dark gate. Eöl he names himself, and he is a tall elf, dark and grim, of the kindred of the Sindar. Yet he claims the lady Aredhel as his wife, and demands to be brought before you. His wrath is great, and he is hard to restrain, but we have not slain him, as your law commands."
Well, there you go.
His wrath is great, and he is hard to restrain. That's an image.
That's we had to use mace and pepper spray and a taser.
Yeah. Yeah.
My goodness. This is.
But claimed Aredhel as wife. Watch that word "claim." It's going to come up quite a few times in the coming paragraphs.
And he demands to come before you.
Demands to come before the king.
You might want to reconsider
that.
Yeah, you might not.
Yeah.
Be careful what you ask for.
But Aredhel.
Yeah, Aredhel.
Taking the high road.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, hey, we didn't know he was following us. I promise you, I swear.
Yeah.
But, I am his wife. He's the father of Maeglin here.
Yeah.
So let's bring him on in.
Yeah.
And so we get this great moment. Well, let's see. I don't know. Is there anything else we want to discuss before we read the next passage?
I think you can go to the next passage.
I wanted to make sure. And so it was done. And Eöl was brought to Turgon's hall and stood before his high seat, proud and sullen. Though he was amazed no less than his son at all that he saw, his heart was filled the more with anger and with hate of the Noldor. But Turgon treated him with honor, and rose up and would take his hand, and he said, "Welcome, kinsman, for so I hold you. Here you shall dwell at your pleasure, save only that you must here abide, and depart not from my kingdom. For it is my law, that none who finds the way hither shall depart." But Eöl withdrew his hand. "I acknowledge not your law," he said. "No right have you or any of your kin in this land to seize realms or to set bounds, either here or there. This is the land of the Teleri, to which you bring war and all unquiet, dealing ever proudly and unjustly. I care nothing for your secrets, and I came not to spy upon you, but to claim my own, my wife and my son. Yet if in Aredhel, your sister, you have some claim, then let her remain. Let the bird go back to the cage, where soon she will sicken again as she sickened before. But not so, Maeglin. My son you shall not withhold from me. Come, Maeglin, son of Eöl. Your father commands you. Leave the house of his enemies and the slayers of his kin, or be accursed." But Maeglin answered nothing. Then Turgon sat in his high seat, holding his staff of doom, and in a stern voice spoke. "I will not debate with you, Dark Elf,
By the swords of the Noldor alone are your sunless woods defended. Your freedom to wander there wild you owe to my kin, and but for them, long since you would have labored in thraldom in the pits of Angband. And here I am king, and whether you will it or will it not, my doom is law. This choice only is given to you, to abide here or to die here, and so also for your son. Then Eöl looked into the eyes of King Turgon, and he was not daunted, but stood long without word or movement, while a still silence fell upon the hall. And Aredhel was afraid, knowing that he was perilous. Suddenly, swift as a serpent, he seized a javelin that he held beneath his cloak, and cast it at Maeglin, crying, "The second choice I take, and for my son also, you shall not hold what is mine." But Aredhel sprang before the dart, and it smote her in the shoulder, and Eöl was overborne by many, and set in bonds, and led away, while others tended Aredhel. But Maeglin, looking upon his father, was silent. What a scene,
Wow.
huh? You know,
What
people
a
talk about
scene.
making a movie of this book. This would make a pretty intense scene, no doubt.
It really would, yeah. Oh, man.
Tons of stuff to talk
love
about here.
Yes.
We get the Dark Elf comes out, you know. When in
Oh,
doubt,
yeah.
that's how the Noldor do it.
Turgon, yeah. He definitely shows his proud Noldor side there. Noldor side.
Yeah.
Calling him Dark Elf. I love by the swords of the Noldor alone are your sunless woods defended.
I could just hear Sean Bean delivering that line.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's so Boromir. It's
It really is, isn't it?
the by our valor, the wild folk of the east are still restrained. I think it is.
By our blood are your lands kept free.
Yeah, that's in the movie. Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
movie
that's it.
version, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's what I hear.
Oh man. Yeah, totally.
Oh, man.
So cool. I think it's I like that Turgon, unlike Curufin, and I hinted at this a moment ago, Turgon actually recognizes the marriage is legitimate.
Right. And he
welcome,
starts-
kinsman, for
Right.
so I hold you. That's,
Exactly.
You know,
And that's what I mean about benefit of the doubt. You know, here's
Yeah.
a guy who, you know, I'm going to, if my sister says you're her husband, you're her husband.
you're her husband.
It was
And
done.
You're here, you can stay, but hey, this is Gondolin. Nobody leaves Gondolin.
Right. And it's not just you. Nobody can leave.
Right. Nobody leaves Gondolin.
Wow. But of course, I don't hold to your law. I don't think you have
No.
any authority here. This is,
Well, and
which
here
is
we,
pretty
you know,
brave
here
to
we
say.
get
You're
the,
standing in the king's hall with,
right.
you know, a bunch of armed guys around you, and you're saying,
Yeah.
authority? What authority? Well, I don't
Yeah.
know the authority I have to just kill you right now
right.
because I'm the
But here you-
king.
But here you get really the heart of Eöl's complaint is, you know, they're on his land.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that's what's underlay all of his issues with the Noldor since the
Yeah.
beginning.
They shouldn't even be here.
They shouldn't even be here.
Yeah. And then I love this. I'm not here to spy. I don't care about you. I'm here to claim my own.
Lame. Yeah.
My property
How's that
is
for
here. I'd like to
possessiveness?
I'd
Yeah.
like to take my property back with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but if in your sister you have some claim,
Right.
this is a person.
Yeah.
This is a royal.
She might want to have a
person.
word to say about this.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
But no, it's
you
all
know,
about, you know, yeah, you claim her or am I claiming her? You know, what?
Right.
How are we going to do this?
excuse me, I
Should we
claim
draw
myself. Should we
Right.
It is pretty nasty, and I love this. Let the bird go back to the cage. I mean, you know, we talked about the gilded cage.
Yeah.
Certainly, and you know, he's not wrong when he says soon she'll sicken again as she sickened before.
No, that is true. That is very likely true.
I mean, soon being another 200
Based on what
years,
we-
maybe. You know,
sure, yeah.
she is an elf, but
Certainly what we've seen of her, you know, she wearied of it before.
Right.
She will weary of it again.
But
Yeah.
this is that moment where, you know, we talked about before that he doesn't love her anymore. Clearly, he doesn't. I mean, he whatever. She wants to stay. That's fine with me. I don't care. I just need my son back.
But I want my son.
Right.
And I don't think it has anything to do with him caring about his son.
Right.
It's
I
just,
miss him. He
but
and I
my
have
son
such great
belongs to me.
times together.
Right,
No.
yes. But my son is also my possession, and I want my possession back.
Right, because he knows how to find ores in the mountains, and I'm pretty good at making stuff with him that I can trade
Oh,
with
that's a good
dwarves.
point. Yeah.
You know, he's part of my economy.
Right, that's a very good point.
But boy,
Interesting. But
then
this
he does-
moment,
Ooh.
oh, the standoff is, it's like a western, you know. It's like the
Doo-doo-doo.
Yeah, exactly. It's high noon. The gunfight's about to begin.
You get the close-up on the gun.
Yeah.
Here you would get a close-up. You'd get the close-up of his hand reaching into
his cloak for a hidden javelin.
For the hidden javelin.
Because that's honorable.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's poisoned, which is doubly honorable.
It's poisoned, right? Exactly.
What a jerk. Yeah, I love what Aredhel does. This sacrificial love for her son. This proves she loves her son.
Absolutely.
This is not, man. We talk about self-sacrifice. We talk about, earlier we talked about the rescue of Maedhros, and this notion of being willing to sacrifice yourself for another person is the ultimate expression of unconditional love.
Yeah.
She does that here. No hesitation at all. She jumps in front of it.
Sprang before it.
Yeah. And, it took her in the shoulder. So, you don't think it's a problem yet. It doesn't look like it will be, but we'll get to that. Let me have you go ahead and read the next little bit there.
Yep. It was appointed that Eöl should be brought on the next day to the king's judgment, and Aredhel and Idril moved Turgon to mercy. But in the evening Aredhel sickened, though the wound had seemed little, and she fell into the darkness, and in the night she died, for the point of the javelin was poisoned, though none knew it until too late. Therefore when Eöl was brought before Turgon, he found no mercy, and they led him forth to the Caragdur, a precipice of black rock upon the north side of the hill of Gondolin, there to cast him down from the sheer walls of the city. And Maeglin stood by and said nothing.
Wow.
But at the last Eöl cried out, "So you forsake your father and his kin, ill-gotten son. Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I." Then they cast Eöl over the Caragdur, and so he ended, and to all in Gondolin it seemed just. But Idril was troubled, and from that day she mistrusted her kinsman. But Maeglin prospered and grew great among the Gondolindrim, praised by all, and high in the favor of Turgon. For if he would learn eagerly and swiftly all that he might, he had much also to teach.
My goodness.
I noticed 3 times Maeglin is addressed here.
Yeah.
By his father. By his father every single time, I think. Silent every single time.
Yeah.
He has nothing to say.
Nothing. Well, you tried to kill me, Dad. You threw a javelin at me.
This is true.
And
but even before, he was silent.
And you killed my mom because of it.
Yeah.
I liked her. I didn't like you, but I liked her.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
Man. The foreboding prophecy here.
Oh, this prophecy of death. We have these moments throughout the Silmarillion where people speak,
kind of with that foresight of death, right?
The foresight of death. That's the phrase I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Right before they die, they often...
Like Feanor knowing with the foresight of death that, nobody's ever going to overcome...
Right, Thangorodrim, yeah,
but he still tells his sons to do it anyway.
Right.
Because that's the nice guy he is.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we won't, maybe this happens, maybe it doesn't, this particular prophecy. But it's sure interesting, isn't it?
It sure is interesting. Also interesting is Aredhel's reaction and Idril's reaction.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, Idril's.
I mean, before they found out the javelin was poisoned, Turgon had actually been convinced to show mercy by Aredhel and Idril. And I'm impressed by Idril's mercy because she doesn't know these people.
No.
Well, she knows Aredhel, but she doesn't know Maeglin and Eöl. So that shows something of her character.
Yes, it does.
But for Aredhel to move her brother to mercy after Eöl has tried to kill their son and wounded her with a wound that she doesn't yet realize is mortal.
Right.
That's astounding to me. That just says so much about her. You talk about self-sacrifice for her son. There's there's an element of self-sacrifice, almost sort of vouching for Eöl.
Yeah, there really is.
He's really, he's okay. He's just hot-tempered. You can just imagine what she must have argued. But it's just fascinating to me that what a selfless person. And
it raises my opinion of her quite a bit.
It does, yeah, because she does kind of seem, prone to making kind of not the best decisions. But rash decisions. But here, wow, you just see her heart, and it's just it's moving.
It really is. It is pretty cool. Yeah, I know. At this point, it's just a flesh wound. You know. Sadly, it won't stay that way. But yeah,
it is but a scratch.
I'm back here. Oh, never mind. Oh, Aredhel is a Black Knight. Not a good scene. So yeah, they toss him over. I thought this was interesting, though. Idril now is troubled. I think she really is deeply troubled by Maeglin's silence.
I think you're right.
And, by the fact that she, here Idril and Aredhel had spent all this time moving Turgon to mercy. And here's the son not saying a word.
The person who you would think would be the first to step up. And
to beg and say, please don't kill my father. No. And yet everybody else seems to be, taken to Maeglin. He's praised by all, high in the favor of the king. He learns a lot. He teaches a lot.
We see he brings a lot of good things to Gondolin during his time there.
Smithcraft, mining, the hard iron, a bunch of forged metal. He makes their arms better. He's even wise in counsel.
He's also wise in counsel and wary.
Hardy and valiant.
And yet hardy and valiant at need.
And we'll see that, when the Nirnaeth Arnoediad comes later. I got to pronounce it first.
Nice.
Snuck that in
Nicely done.
Because I probably won't be able to do it again. I mean,
we see that he went to the war and fought. So I was kind of laughing at the fact that he probably can't swing a sword. Actually, he does. He is a good fighter.
Yeah.
Or at least he is later. So
he's fell and fearless in battle. There's something to be said for that.
He does good things for Gondolin.
Yeah, he really does.
But it's not going to last, of course.
No, it's not. But before things go south, though, you said you wanted to bring in something from The Hobbit. I wanted to make sure we had time to do that. Though I don't think we have time to do anything. I think we're probably pushing 2.5 hours now. We're sorry, folks.
We're getting up there.
This is a long one. We'll try to keep future ones a little shorter.
Hopefully, we've kept it interesting. But yeah, I wanted to bring in something from The Hobbit. We don't get to do this very often, but we love to bring in references to the so-called more known works. And I actually meant to do this last time when we first mentioned Gondolin, but I think it actually works better here. So first-time readers who have not read the Silmarillion before should have heard of will have heard of Gondolin before and should remember the name. It's actually mentioned in The Hobbit. And I'm going to go back to Chapter 3, a short rest for a mention of Gondolin that I think is especially applicable here.
Definitely.
Elrond knew all about runes of every kind. That day, he looked at the swords they had brought from the troll's lair, speaking, of course, of the dwarves, and the swords they picked up from the trolls. The swords they had brought from the troll's lair, and he said, "These are not troll make. They are old swords, very old swords of the high elves of the west, my kin. They were made in Gondolin for the goblin wars. They must have come from a dragon's hoard or goblin plunder, for dragons and goblins destroyed that city many ages ago." Oops, spoilers. This, Thorin, the runes named Orcrist, the goblin cleaver in the ancient tongue of Gondolin. It was a famous blade. This, Gandalf, was Glomdring, foe hammer that the king of Gondolin once wore. Keep them well.
My goodness.
So that's the passage I wanted to bring in because it's just,
and it is perfect here. I mean, given what we know that
we were talking about what Maeglin's Smithcraft, and I have it in my mind that Orcrist and Glomdring were probably some of the weapons that Maeglin's knowledge helped create.
Yeah, he may not have smithed them, but certainly the weapons.
He may not have smithed them himself, but
the mining that he...
The knowledge, Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, if he and remember that Maeglin had some knowledge from the dwarves,
right?
And if that contributed to this, how cool is it that Orcrist actually ended up back in Thorin's hands and was actually buried with him? Yeah,
that's a nice little full circle thought, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
And then, of course, Glomdring went on to do great things in Gandalf's hands, and that had apparently been the sword of Turgon, the king of Gondolin.
The king's own sword.
Who, by the way, Elrond would have known quite a bit about.
Yeah, that is true. For those
because when he says my kin,
he literally
they were
means,
very close kin.
Yeah. Turgon would have been his great-grandfather.
Right.
So he wouldn't have known him.
No, that's true. He did never. I don't think he never did meet him. But
no, because even his father was very, very young,
right,
still a child when
Gondolin fell. Yeah, that's true. But still, a pretty close relation, and it's just there's those little cool things that are just hidden in The Hobbit, just below the surface if you know the whole story.
I love that. And then we see those see those things in The Hobbit. We see them in The Lord of the Rings, where there's these references to first age stuff that I just love. Those are so cool,
right,
and so enjoyable.
And also, although Elrond doesn't name Sting, Sting is not really a weapon of any kind of note. It wasn't like a special sword or anything. It was just a little knife that was
more of a letter opener, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just a little Hobbit-sized thing. But we do think that came from Gondolin too, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's got it's the same smith work.
It's the same metal with the glow, with the blue, glow
with the blue glow.
Yeah.
So anyway,
very cool. Okay, well, let's see. Let me go ahead and tackle the next passage here because we've got some things to talk before we wrap it up. Thus all seemed well with the fortunes of Maeglin, who had risen to be mighty among the princes of the Noldor, and greatest save one in the most renowned of their realms. Yet he did not reveal his heart, and though not all things went as he would, he endured it in silence, hiding his mind so that few could read it, unless it were Idril Celebrimbor. For from his first days in Gondolin he had borne a grief ever worsening that robbed him of all joy. He loved the beauty of Idril, and desired her, without hope. The Eldar wedded not with kin so near, nor ever before had any desired to do so. And however that might be, Idril loved Maeglin not at all, and knowing his thought of her, she loved him the less, for it seemed to her a thing strange and crooked in him, as indeed the Eldar ever since have deemed it, an evil fruit of the kinslaying, whereby the shadow of the curse of Mandos fell upon the last hope of the Noldor. But as the years passed, still Maeglin watched Idril and waited, and his love turned to darkness in his heart, and he sought the more to have his will in other matters, shirking no toil or burden, if he might thereby have power. Thus it was in Gondolin, and amid all the bliss of that realm, while its glory lasted, a dark seed of evil was sown.
Well, that's not foreboding at all.
Not at all. We can't have good things.
No, not at all.
My goodness. Well, we certainly come back to Knockout's question.
Yes, definitely.
I'm going to say in this case, yeah. I mean, I look at this that as the years passed, he watched her and waited, and his love turned to darkness in his heart. That seems to me like the text is supporting the notion that his rejection, drives some of his future actions. But he definitely had that potential there in the first place. I mean, he was already pursuing the kingship of Gondolin.
He was ambitious before he set foot in that kingdom.
Before he'd ever seen her.
He was already thinking about it before he even saw her. And she was always a means to an end. I think you're right. I think lust or
it's not
something
love, it's
approaching love developed for her infatuation.
Right.
Let's acknowledge the fact that he really didn't have anybody to learn about what love is. And I'm not making the joke again. It's just he just didn't really.
Right. No, he was in a pretty isolated backwoods.
Right.
I'm sure none of Eöl's servants had daughters his age.
No.
Where's he going to meet a girl?
And certainly his father and his mother's relationship was not a very healthy one.
No, not at all.
So what is he going to base his concept of love on? It's going to be a concept of a possessive love.
Well, just like he saw with his father. I mean, that's
like he saw with his father.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think you're right. I do think something akin to love, or some kind of love, develops for Idril.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because she spurns him that he turns evil. I'm still not sure I'm there.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah.
But maybe,
like we said, he was evil to begin with. I think the only thing I'd concede is that the degree of his evil ends up being worse for having been rejected.
Yeah, that could be.
He was already evil. He was already possessive. He was
ambitious and possessive. Maybe he wasn't.
But now he's treasonous. Right. Exactly. He's added something to it. So it certainly has worsened. It is.
Yeah.
It has taken the bad characteristics in his heart and amplified them.
Yeah, I think without the rejection, he might have just continued to pursue a more another kind of usurpation of the throne.
Certainly.
Maybe something still kind of gone after Idril somehow, as opposed to what he ended up doing, which we won't talk about.
Let's assume that Idril had decided, okay, first cousin or not, you're hot, I like you, let's go for this. Do you think he suddenly wouldn't have wanted to still become king? No, he'd always wanted to become
absolutely,
king.
Yeah.
Would he have been as evil? Would he have been willing to commit the kind of treason that he may or may not, spoiler alert, be committing in the near future? I don't know. That's why, like I said, it's more of about the rejection. Changing the degree of
the rejection changes it. It multiplies it.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good way to put it. Multiplies it. Wow. What a heck of a chapter, huh?
It is. Yeah, it's a sad one. It really is, and it's sad because it's just so human.
It is. This shows
relatable.
all of our weaknesses. It just reminds us of how easy it is to fall, to make the same mistakes.
And we talked, we've talked so much about Feanor and the kind of darkness that he has in him. That is still so. There's some human elements to it, but it's also very much a philosophical fall and a philosophical corruption. This is just a very human.
Very fleshy. There's a lot of
good word.
Yeah, I think because of that lust, that carnal sort of thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
It's that weakness of flesh that drives this, both for Eöl and then for Maeglin. Really unfortunate. But that, after an extensively long period of time, wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. But as always, we thank you very much for joining us, especially since you had to listen so very long tonight.
And join us again when we see, finally, the coming of men into the West on Chapter 17 of The Coming of Men into the West.
Tolkien and his cleverly named chapters.
Indeed.
It has been a long time coming, but that chapter is definitely worth waiting for. So remember, if you need cheap paperbacks to mark up, you can use the links on our library page at theprancingponypodcast.com. We also have links there to audiobooks, music CDs, and some other cool things for your Tolkien collection.
And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe on iTunes or Google Play Music. We really need your iTunes reviews, so please leave one if you haven't, and we greatly appreciate your support.
And those of you who have left reviews, we're really thankful.
Yes, thank you very much for all the reviews. We're also on Stitcher and TuneIn, and thanks to those of you who are visiting and commenting on social media. This is The Prancing Pony, and you can join the conversation in the common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media is a great place to share our podcast as well, which we're always grateful. Retweet us, share us, tell your friends. And anyway, one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or 101 uses for a slightly crumpled suit of black armor to the Prancing... Swoosh. It's a little wet inside. To the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com. We'll try to get them into our next episode. Well, 2 and a ridiculous amount, 2.5 hours, 2 hours, something like that.
Was it really that long?
I think it was about 2 hours. I can't tell. It's still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners, even if it's far too long a time for you. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.